industry and extensive experience in the global entertainment industry, previously serving as the head of African music strategy at Sony Music for African culture. That's just a summary of it. I'm sure they'll be able to tell you a lot more about that, but please welcome to the stage Tunde. So, we have a conversation that has to be cut short because of time, but we're trying to make the most of it. So, gentlemen, welcome. This is going to be a very free conversation. I know I've prepared questions and stuff, but trust me, we're not going to do because we're going to. So, I'm going to start off with just general questions. I'm sure there's a lot that you guys want to know about these guys. There's a lot that you guys want to know about why we're talking about cultural fusion. And we can easily call this something else. Probably with other people who have started with Afro beats and stuff, but let's not get into that conversation right now. This is about Africa's culture. This is about the fusion of African culture with the rest of the world. You all know how Africa's culture is taking off. Now, all of a sudden, it's something that is mainstream. It wasn't the same thing maybe 15, 20 years ago. Depending on what time period you're looking at, it's had different parts of it highlighted. Now, I think it's safe to say we're at our boom, right? And it's important to know how we hope to maintain that. Not just maintain that, but how it's affecting each of us in our different industries. And so I'm going to put this question out there for everyone on the panel, just in your own separate industry. As artists, as creators, how is this emerging trend of African culture being mainstream now affecting your own industry? How is it shaping it? I think we can start off with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would maybe just kind of push back, thinking about the framing of that question. I personally, I don't like to think about trends when I'm thinking about culture, art, and creativity, because when you focus on trends, you're reducing everything to a consumer moment, and moments aren't movements. And I think when we're thinking about what's happening right now in Africa, if we're talking about it actually becoming a global imprint, that implies permanence, right? It implies something that is beyond the trend. So, like when we're looking at the way that African artists are innovating today, it's not necessarily just like the surface level, right? I think they're fundamentally shifting a lot of the frameworks in terms of how our art is not only produced, but also kind of perceived at global scale, right? In terms of like the ingenuity in music, I mean, those, visual arts.
Yeah, it's yes, right now,
I
yeah.
just hold it.
Yes.
What I was saying is that, like, I try to push back against the framing of trends because, African culture isn't this consumable moment, right? It's something enduring. There's a legacy, there's history to it, and we kind of focus on trends. I think it can become incredibly reductive, especially as we're thinking about how to sort of cement Africa's place within the global imprint. That means like we're really kind of baking it into the global consciousness, right? Trends aren't baked into the global consciousness, right? So I would maybe just take a step back and kind of thinking about this as trends. Also, another thing too, though, trending, it focuses on novelty, which is like pretty capitalist, and again, it doesn't really kind of deal with the fact that like we've been doing this for a very long time. So legacies and histories of culture that can't be reduced to
Thank you.
I'm just waiting. Can you hear me?
Not yet.
Can you hear me? No.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Just to echo what he said, I think, like he said, it's not novelty. So when we talk about African genius, for example, it's always been around. And I think what's happening now is that they're getting credit. And it's quite interesting to see what's going on because we had this discussion with you. I was like, it wasn't always cool to be African 20 years ago. It wasn't always cool to be African like a couple of years ago. It's now, like, I remember my friend was talking about the African blues fashion. And I thought it was funny but at the same time, I'm sure those kids find it funny. But we live in a generation, an age right now where just even have an African accent in school, it wasn't always like that. A lot of people are aware of that. So I say this to say that I think we've been consuming African engineers, music, art, from a long time ago. But right now, it just happens to live in an age where there's cameras in us, and thanks to the internet, it's easier to see. You can just literally go on YouTube, go on TikTok, and go on Instagram and see where it's actually coming from. There's no third party, there's no intermediary, like it's straight to the source. I think it's a good time to do that.
That's very interesting. I think that runs it perfectly for 2 minutes to step in here.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of what Aaron said. I think growing up here in the States and seeing what was happening on the continent, it was really interesting to see that tide shift when it did. But it did happen once, like you mentioned earlier. It's not something that is permanent, or more of like it happened in waves. Right? So first wave happened before I was born in the 80s, from essentially as the first real entertainment or cultural export from Nigeria that kind of took over and became like what African Mali, right? So that first wave. Second wave would have been Two-Face, African Queens, right? The second wave. Third wave was This Kid, and now we're in the fourth wave with like Grandma, Ashake, Verna. I'm only speaking about West Africa. I know there's a whole bunch of others. I don't want to say one is Nigeria. First wave could have been Mary Makeba, Hugh Masekela, first wave. Second wave could have been Kenna from Ethiopia, Sudan. Where's Kenna from? Just in New York? Just in Rome. Third wave would have been Mareba. No, Fowley's still coming, I think. Fowley's coming. Confusion me. And the fourth wave would now be. Somebody just said a drill that line. No, but it's been nice to see the waves happen and global recognition come with it, because I think that it's nice to be known for jollof rice, but I think when you have when you have a cultural export that can be seen not just on WhatsApp, and you can see it on Netflix and Amazon, and you can see it on Spotify, Apple Music, etc. It's just nice to see a consistency in the work waking up. So what's going to be the this whole time?
Thank you. That's very interesting. I think you all touched on one thing that's a common theme here, which is we're out there now, right? We're getting credit for our culture, which is sad to say in a sense because it's always been just right. I guess the main question that people have asked when it comes to culture in Africa making a wave over here, making a wave in the rest of the world is where is the benefit to the Africans? Economic impact, if you can call it that, right? There are two questions that I have here that can actually pinpoint of that. The cultural assets belong to the continents, but how does that contribute to the local economy? And how can we ensure that the benefits of this cultural exchange, if you can call it that, flow back to the continent? And that's different for different departments, different verticals. That's different in art world, it's different in music. I mean, in Nigeria, for example, where I'm from, we've heard of one exit particular for the music industry. And I think that's about everyone just holding on to maybe as an example. So where does that leave us? How do we maintain this? Well, it's not a trend, according to that. This is something that is an imprint, right? Because I think we all know to an extent that there were trends that were there before. I mean, that were even their cultures that were around the world. I mean, I would say something like reggae now, for example. Not reggae, no cancel me, please. I mean, to an extent, there were different types of genres that were more popular than others in the past, right? And those genres right now, in terms of popularity, they're improving. How can we ensure that this is not the case for most of the things that are popping right now?
That's a really, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. No, that's a really good question. I like to think about it like with the metaphor of the stage, right? So agnostic of discipline, whether it's film, music, whatever, Africans aren't actually the ones creating the stage, right? Like the stage, they're being invited onto the stage, right? So if you actually think of who's like shaping the infrastructure around how arts, culture, et cetera, is produced and exported, it's not Africans, right? Like Tyler might have this hit, but you know, she's not like, there's again, that whole work of
machine.
like stage making, of deciding who gets to be on, and deciding what gets funded, how it gets funded, for how long. We need more Africans in those positions, right? Because that's how you ensure that the people on the ground are actually, you know, benefiting and reaping, you know, the value of our creative genius, right? It's also how you kind of create institutions. It's like we need cultural institutions just as much as we need viable economic social institutions, right? So I think it's, again, going back to the metaphor of the stage, it's because we are the ones creating the stage. We're being invited on, it's great, you know, we're getting more invites now, even +1s, cool. Like, we need to build our own stages, and I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think structure is very important. I'm starting to see a trend now where a lot of, like when you think about artists and you think about what's popular in the world, you see a lot of artists when they get noticed, they eventually sign deals with, you know, institutions here. And when you think about it, whatever they're making doesn't really go back to the continent. The structure is here. And unfortunately, the way the world still works, the values still detained in the West. So a lot of people are still looking for validation here, validation, you know. So I wouldn't say it's a disadvantage. I think we kind of we already like burst through, but now it's more like, now that we're here, how do we like stay here? And I think in the art community, for example, I've been thinking about, like, every time I go to the museum and I see a lot of arts, I don't know if you guys see a lot of arts from the continent, and you see the Benin mask, you see the Ife head, and they have all this very weird description sometimes. I just always think to myself, I'm like, the story here is not complete. But you know what the story will be complete? It was back, you know, in Lagos, or in Ibadan, or in Osun State, where it actually belongs. So, I mean, these guys have had these pieces for so long. There's nothing stopping them from actually returning them back to what they are for. You know, building museums back home. Because the truth is, you know, a lot of times the West is learning more about us than we're learning about us. I think it's time we want to start the structures. They've earned so much from it, so I think it's only fair to build, you know, on the continent. We're not asking for too much, and also put them there, because the truth is, when you travel to Europe or you want to learn about Italy, you go to the cathedrals. Want to learn about Paris, you go to the, you know, Louvre, and you learn about, you know, you want to learn about Nigeria, you want to learn about people, you should go to the museums too, you know. So we need to start thinking that way, and I've been advocating for it, but it just looks like we're begging, you know. They're not ready yet, but I feel like whatever is ours should be ours. And I think, I mean, the world shouldn't pay lip service to that. I think we should all join in the cause and like, you know, just keep talking about it and spreading the word like a stages like this and where we can go. So that's not it.
Well said. I agree. I think a lot of us that are in some of these rooms that we mentioned earlier are fighting this fight where we can. But infrastructure remains the main opportunity for people on the continent from my vantage point, because no matter what room I'm in, I'm always stressing the creators, like, make sure you own your IP as much as you can, make sure you have a great lawyer, make sure you have a great team around you, make sure you don't have homeboy management. And you laugh at them, but homeboy management is usually the reason why the artist that you loved 2 summers ago, you're not hearing from him right now. Bad money management is usually, you know, part of that as well. So business manager, lawyer, all that stuff. But even if your own team is right as a creator, sometimes the infrastructure is still not there. So, you know, I'm not the only person that stresses this, but some artists, some creators, I'm not saying artists, some creators like to just like rush to do whatever it is they want to create. But then because of the lack of infrastructure, not a bigger opportunity that would have met them if they had all their, you know, their stuff in order, misses them. It goes to somewhere that's less talented, you know, less creative, but they've had, you know, better infrastructure, really, as an individual. And then as a culture, I think the unfortunate stereotype that a lot of Africans tend to have is we don't have a maintenance culture. So let's say someone builds something amazing, right? The problem is not us creating it because we're African. We create amazing things. But the problem is once we create it, we don't maintain it. And so you'll have a bunch of great idea people that will create something, and then they won't train the people when they're gone to like keep it going and improve it and evolve it and train the next generation to want to improve on it and evolve it. And we can apply this to any industry you want, even when it comes to education and history. Like you just talked about the environment, there should be a consortium of people on the continent trying to get that stuff back.
There are.
I believe that there are, but there should be a lot more people than and we've seen examples of this across the board. So my hope is that those that are involved with the culture at the extent that I know they should be. I hope that there is more attention paid to making sure that the infrastructures are in place so that not just our generation, but the generation after us has something to look forward to.
I think that's probably a great point to segue this a bit. I mean, you mentioned the point about museums, about art going back to where it belongs. And I know, Antia, you.
Ashil, everyone's call me it's Ashil or Ashil.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's like, where Ant come from?
I just call you. I don't call you Ashley.
Oh, sorry.
That's where I come from, the emails.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's good. That's
Okay,
good.
okay. So you work at Mellon Foundation. And Mellon has done a lot in terms of trying to restore cultural, heritage back to where it belongs, right? And on that note, unfortunately, we had one of our keynotes canceled on us because of what was going back home. You're going to hear from him later, the governor of Edo State. You work in the state right now, recently putting some money into MOA. For those who don't know, that's the Museum of West African Arts. And I'm sure you can talk more about that. I'm going to let you just briefly talk about that, what that investment does for the topic of that particular conversation.
No, for sure, and that's an excellent segue about bronze and MOA. So MOA is an African art museum in Benin City, and we gave them a $5 million grant. It's going to be supporting some of their organizational capacity, their exhibitions, because one thing we're actually finding on the continent as well, a lot of the talent leave, right? Because if you're a curator, an artist, whatever, like you can't necessarily get the best salaries and like Lagos, Accra, what have you, and we're really trying to invest in kind of just really building it up from an organizational capacity standpoint, making sure that the people who are working in these industries actually have livable wages. And so what you're saying about preservation, right? Like when Benin bronze movement kind of took off, there was this huge debate about, will they survive an African museum because they don't have the AC? Like again, the AC. But I mean, it's shit like that.
Valid question.
No, you get those sorts of questions, and I think one thing that's really cool about MOA is that they're actually really working with the community, right? And so what you're saying, just sort of like that main streets culture, like teaching people like even the bronze techniques, right? That's part of the grant as well. Just making sure that those skills, those artisans, those artisanal practices are being carried out and through the next generation. And I think that's kind of the role that philanthropy in general is playing. So Mellon, we're the largest funder of the arts in America, we're the largest funder of the arts in the world, and we spend around like $600 million every year on just arts funding. A lot of that goes to like the Met, MoMA, Smithsonian, this gallery here and there, but now we're really trying to think more expansively, right, about where impact can happen. So like $5 million in Nigeria, that can do like 50x what it could do here in New York City, right? So just in terms of like scale, in terms of ensuring that, we're really kind of like providing people the resources to preserve these institutions. It's important because we can't depend on our government, unfortunately. But even though that should be something the Nigerian government is involved and invested in. But again, we are not to do.
Governor Lasky would disagree.
Oh.
But that's not what you're saying. Historically, that hasn't been the case. I think since I've been here, a specific question, I'll probably move to there and David. We talked a lot about culture being exposed out of the continent. Now, when there's a cultural fusion, as we name this particular time, right, there's a risk of losing losing your authenticity, right? And I guess the question here is, how do you avoid that risk, and how do you make sure that adaptation does not occur harmfully?
Okay, I will. I think the first way is the approach. How do you actually see yourself? And how do you see your culture? For me, I've always thought about culture as a medium. I've always thought about art as a language. And a lot of the art, for example, I do a lot of Yoruba art, and what I use, Yoruba art itself, it's a language, it's like hieroglyphs, it's symbols, it's patterns, it's waves, it's a bunch of things. But then the idea is to be able to see the world through the lens of the Yoruba person. So if I was going to talk about a story to you, something that just broke to you, or come out of the house, I'm going to do it in such a way as to reflect the views of the Yoruba person observing what's happening. So in that way, I'm able to capture what's contemporary with the lens of the Yoruba person. So what I do pretty much is to take that story, whatever story we're talking about, to like code it in such a way that whether you're a Yoruba person sees it or African sees it or Yoruba Nigerian sees it, like, oh, what is being shared here? Or this is very familiar, this is something I can relate to. And that way, we are still on stage, we're talking about whatever it is we're talking about, and we are not using our language or authenticity. It's just to show what it means to be human, complex. Just who we are. We just exist. When you're seeing my viewpoint now, the problem we had before is that we always had to translate everything to English. But with art, you don't have to. Music, you don't have to. You know, dance, you know, exactly. We can feel it, we understand it, even though we might not really like understand everything that's been told. That's why a lot of, I don't know if anybody heard about the debate that things fall apart being adapted to Idris Elba. There's a lot of conversation around that. I found it very interesting. Nigerians like, no, he will not understand the culture. She will tell us right there. Yeah. But the truth is, the novel is in English. You know, Ichino Achebe wanted it to just be for Nigerians, and he probably wouldn't have done like, you know, what he did. The book is actually for the world. I met people all over the world, and wherever I go, when I say I'm Nigerian, like, oh, I really think so apart. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. You know, so it's a starting point for a lot of us in entry to the arts that people already know who we are. But then we need to build on that. You know, and all building on that is just showing who we are as a people and not losing, like, who we are at the core of what it is that makes us Yoruba, what makes me evil, what makes me Hausa, what makes me, you know, the core person that I am. And I think that's very important. And I bring that to whatever collab I'm doing. I've done like collaborations with a lot of like Star Wars, Belgium, Bulgaria. Like, what I get there, I tell them, okay, I'm going to do like, oh, Bulgaria. It's like, oh, let's do a sense, Money Black. I'm like, oh, hold on, look like Money Black can be shown. They're like, huh? What's that? Cool. Bring up the slide, explain what it means to them, and they're like, oh, wow, I love this. So, let me talk about them, man, and also infuse my culture. Anyway.
Raul and I are quite close. I always have a lot of respect for the work that he does. And I would say that a lot of the work that I do is similar to Raul in the way that I tend to use my culture, my culture, to educate those around me about African culture as I know it, and Yoruba culture as I was raised in it. So when he was talking about, he tries to create art through the lens of Yoruba. So he's talking about UI, which is in our culture, we believe in a set of rules and ways of life that our character is defined by, which we call UI. And as someone that walks that path, the term that we would call ourselves are Omugbabi, meaning that we are literally like people that are walking that way. So I think that the way he does it, whether I'm in a room with a brand, or if I'm working with an artist, or if I'm tasked with, working with a company or building something out, I'm always keeping that at the back of my mind, like, what would my ancestors say if they were here and had the opportunity to witness me do this? Right? Because most of the people I'm sitting in the room don't understand most of what I'm trying to teach them. But I'm also the king of Canada, so if I have to pull a slide up and have a conversation and they ask me who's Queen India, you know what I'm saying? I might have to pull out that. So, a very perfect example, when I was at Spotify, I was building after Afro, you know, if left to the powers that be, it would look like National Geographic. And, you know, I went to Nigeria, I went to Nairobi, I went to South Africa, I went to different places so I could like meet the people, see the culture firsthand, and see what things I could grasp from the cultures that could be represented on the platform. I didn't want to just be a Nigerian thing, you know, and I think that's you know, what a lot of people that end up in certain roles that are tasked with certain tasks like that, they tend to just see it from their lens. Like if they're from East Africa, boom, it's Habesha everywhere. If they're from West Africa, boom, it's Jollof rice. South Africa, yeah, both, you know what I'm saying? So I had to make sure that I, you know, was pulling from all the resources. And if I didn't have the resource, I could find a friend that had the resource, right? So I think it's very important that, and for those in the room that are in positions where they have the opportunity to educate people that are not of their culture about their culture, like, don't drop the ball. Because you may be the only exposure they have to their culture, and you may not think it's that big of a deal, but when they start calling Jello, it's your fault. So if anybody asks about Jello fries, I was like, who in this room told them Jello fries?
I'm going to cut you there because I don't want conversations about your love before we start the Civil War.
Even Puffy counts.
There's nothing wrong with your love.
Unless, never mind.
I mean, like, that way we did serve everyone food.
Don't tell them where it was from.
We didn't tell people
We don't need wars.
but we got the feedback. I know the answers. So, we got to ourselves. We're not supposed to
Very sweet.
Okay. I would love to ask more questions, but I think we're very short on time. So I will leave the questions. I've heard a lot of more questions out there, you know, so I'm going to open it up to the crowd. So if you guys have any questions for our panel here, please throw it at them. All right.
A quick reminder for everybody, please, introduce yourself before asking your question. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jadai. So I have a question in terms of how do you leverage art in a content that's very multifaceted and diverse. Because I know we talked about a lot of the Anglophone spaces on this panel, but we're in a continent of like hundreds of languages. I myself come from a Francophone country, which has a lot of historical, like musical influence. If we can people like Sami Keita, various things like that. So I guess how do we leverage art in a space that I think it's very easy to like put the Anglophone world, like Africa, on a platform because it is more palatable. But how are we allowing for opportunities for more exposure to that type?
Yeah, I'm so glad I'm also Francophone, Cameroon. And yeah, that's the thing, coming back to what Tuesday was saying, I think sometimes the issue with a lot of people who have these seats is that they can only view the work from the prism of their own experience, and they don't recognize that, like, y'all can hear me? Let me just hold this, because Okay, is this better?
Yeah.
I was saying that the issue is a lot of people who end up occupying these positions, like, are only able to view things through the prism of their own lived experiences, right? And sometimes when that lived experience becomes externalized, it becomes the default. And I think the issue is that a lot of us don't recognize that there are multiple epicenters of cultural production on the African continent, right? So like, some of you, maybe a lot of us are your godfather, but a lot of us are Papalimba, right? Like, you know, it's much more kaleidoscopic than I think it's often presented. But I think it's often, like, never put yourself there and say, I am the African voice. Like, no, I'm Cameroonian. I'm even Cameroonian. Like, like, there's so many, like, layers to that, right? Just always kind of, like, prefacing and clarifying when you're stating things. Like, I'm not going to come here and say I speak on behalf of, I can always speak from Ashio, this is Cameroonian, I grew up in a certain specific context, and that, I think, also is what you're saying, right? The responsibility that we bear people that, you know, may have never met an African, whatever, like, we also have to exercise that productively and make sure that we're contextualizing the things that we're saying, right? Like, I am Cameroonian before I'm even African. You know, you see what I'm saying? Just like nuance it a bit, I think that can kind of push things forward.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think, I think we have the beginning, just put it that way, and there's so much on the continent to take from. I'm like, every time I talk, I say Yoruba, and I say that very intentionally. Yoruba people about 76 million people in the world, you know, and that's not a small number. And I'm talking in Africa, I mean West Africa, not just Nigeria, you have Morocco in the middle, you have Brazil, you have Togo, you have Cameroon, you have it's like scattered all over the world. And I say this here, in Nigeria we have like 500 languages, just Nigeria alone, over 500. And when you think about that, that is like insane number. I think the only country next to that is China that has that much. Nigeria has over 200 million people. So it's like a lot of people when you think about it. That's like most of the population of the US, you know? But they're just scattered. So it's like we are so varied in terms of like cultural identity that I probably might have something more in common with the Japanese than somebody from Kenya. We're that different. So it's very, very easy to like just, you know, like you said, perception. Sometimes everybody's just talking from their own lived experience. It's easy for people to just paint the brush of everybody being black, but we're still the most very people who are black because it's so diverse. Like somebody from Somali, you know, Kenya, South Africans don't do anything like West Africans. So somebody who is not on the continent will be like, oh, they're black. You know, but we know that. So it's our job, like we said, to be very, very direct and also very intentional with how we're talking about it. Nobody is a representative of the continent. You cannot be. It's impossible. You're not even a representative of your own state. You know, your own country. But not your country, the state. Like states is have. All right, yeah, that's the thing. So it's impossible. So we come from like it's insane. But when we try to tell people out here, people are like, how is it possible to have so much life? Yes, it is. In Nigeria, like you literally could go from one street to the other street down the road, it's a different people, and then you go again to a different place, it's totally different language. You know? And they're different, and they've been there for thousands of years. You know? So it's very complex, but we're doing everything we can, and I think as Africans, like I said, you have a phone, you have a phone. I think that's in secondary because those are languages that go and it's just something we've had to, I mean, they've been forced on us the past 100 years, so pretty much is what we are right now. But under that, there's layers of, you know, identity. Even as a Yoruba person, to interest you that I'm Ijebu, what are you? Oyo. They're different Yoruba. So even in Yoruba, you have like subsets.
Completely different.
And totally different language, by the way. But then we have a general language that's Yoruba, but then I speak Ijebu, and Oyo is different. You have the Lord, you have the Cheshire, you have the Igbo, you have the Igbo, you have the Lord, you have the Lord. Exactly. So, and I hear my parents talk, they argue among themselves and they calm each other, and they're from the same place, and I'm like, wow. You know?
Thank you. So, next question, I saw a hand over there, one here. Okay. I think that mic is on. Should we take another question in the meantime? Do you have someone here with a question?
Yeah, we're good, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. 5 minutes. And I just had a question about, you know, Tunde mentioned the waves of Afrobeat. And I just noted you didn't mention any women artists. So I just wanted to see what
I was waiting for it. I didn't know that happened.
generally, I feel like by African male dominated. Is there anything or should anything be done to get more women artists, women musicians? And we saw people say, oh, we have to salvage. And
It wasn't even thinking about it. Respectfully, it wasn't even thinking about it.
besides those three, or, you know, I'm trying to do a few others, but, you know, it's sort of a handful. So what are we doing, if anything that should be done to get more representation? Councilwoman of the panel.
And first,
Before we answer that, I trust me, we did try to get over here on time. We did have to run out of time. Can we put the questions together? Can we have one more question before we answer? Can I have a mic down here?
I can
Okay, yeah.
And I'm so glad you asked that. I know I responded based on the popularity of the artist. I mean, Yvonne Chaka Chaka was great, but she wasn't Michelle Peters.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Like,
You said Mary
I said Mary McKay, but you run these things. Trust me. You know, but the reality of the matter is, a lot of the artists throughout the path or journey of Afro music as a collective, a lot of the male artists were the ones that were promoted more. I wasn't alive back then, I can't tell you why they made that decision. But it is great to see artists like, you mentioned T.Y. Ira Star is amazing. Sammy's great. Tyler's a newcomer, but she's also doing great. Alpiana. Yemi has been killing her entire career. There's so many women. Angela Kidjo's been killing it forever. You know what I'm saying? There's so many women artists that don't get their just due. A lot of the work that we all do here highlights women as much as we do men, for sure, day to day. So it's not really something that I always remember to acknowledge because it's something that we just do. But for the sake of time, I think we just mentioned the artists that are the most popular. But thank you for calling out.
Hi. Hi, I'm Destiny. I'm with the School of Professional Studies. Thank y'all so much. And I just want to ask, as creatives, what advice do you have for those balancing their artistic aspirations with their family's expectations? So, in order for Africans to continue to make a global impact, like y'all mentioned, you want more creatives in art, but it's more of an unknown path than becoming a doctor, lawyer, et cetera. So, what advice do you have?
I like my parents. I told them I went to school for computers and then I was making beats on the computer. I figured it out.
I think it's also, one thing is, like, immigrant kids that I come to find out in my experience, the only way to actually become the people that our parents want us to be is by actually defying them. So context, before I started Mellon, I was on my way to Stanford Law School, and I lied to my parents and said, oh, I deferred.
Lie to your parents.
And then a year later, I'm doing public work, like, okay, they don't still understand like what I do, but like, they a lot of your dreams will always be in touch with people who nurture and love you most. And I think it's taking that risk, but also making sure that you're kind of, keeping that door open for other people. Right? Whenever everyone wants to come to me and chat about philanthropy, I'm like, oh, let's chat about it, because there are not enough Africans here. Like, literally, I can count on my fingers and Mellon, Ford, a lot of the big arts funders, there are very, very few of us in these positions. So just making sure that even as you kind of get your own, bag, keep that door open for others from coming after you as well.
Yeah, very important. I think there's no real balance. I went to law school, became an attorney,
And then you lie to your parents.
practiced law for a few years, and then I quit. And
But you lied to your parents.
yeah, of course. But the truth is, when I quit, I didn't tell them what I was going to do. There was a whole intervention of there's a problem with that crisis and stuff. So a lot of people are going to think a lot of things, but you know who you are to yourself. So at the end of the day, you have to choose yourself. And being true to yourself sometimes might look like rebellion, but it is what it is. You know your struggles, you know who you are, and you know what keeps you up at night at the end of the day. So it's just being true to who you are. Again, I will never tell anybody, good job, follow the parents. No, that decision is not for anybody to tell you. You shouldn't watch anybody, you shouldn't watch anybody's schedule to tell you that. You should just it's something deep down. If you're not that convinced, maybe you shouldn't do it.
I think the only thing stopping you from living out your dreams are your parents. The biggest obstacle are your parents. Lie to your parents. I went to school for computers. They did not move out making beats. I moved out to LA, didn't tell them. Got a job at Apple off a win because I lied to my parents. And when that check came, they did not care. They didn't care.
And I think
You just gotta win. If you're gonna lie, you gotta make sure you win. He's like, yo. You can't lie and fail.
I think that's generally me. I can speak for the business school students here, whose parents, to the extent, don't know what business school is about. They think we're learning here.
networking. All you're doing is networking.
Yeah, I mean, like, we're networking. I don't want to say too much about what networking is, but I know it's networking.
We all have to be
So, now we'll take one more question. I think there's one.
Yeah, okay. Hi, I'm Leila Yusuf, Compass, New York. Yeah, thank you so much. I cannot believe living life without art. So I think it's our responsibility as diaspora living in America or Europe and the next generation. And I think for you students, if you go into banking and blah, 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 whatever, making money, to really have that fund for building the museums. And for people like us who are real estate developers, we come in to the bankers to help us get the money, build the museum, and have the artists there, because it's really up to us to do that. We cannot rely on the government, or maybe in the 10 to 20 years now going into that 1% African families and asking a fund to keep that in teaching in schools, and really also, I'm Somali and Kenyan, and the Yoruba, the Asante, the Fulani dances, like that's part of our history. I don't want to have a museum with a hip hop, and it's not part of the culture that I grew up in. But also a real estate developer, you are going to be one of those participants, Africans who are buying the penthouses in Accra, Nairobi, but you need to have the art in the wall who are you going to go to, and art will come to sell that. So this is what we do in New York every day here, and there are families, since the beginning of their business, they've always said a 10% or 1% money to put into the art, because art is collection. The biggest collectors of art are Estée Lauder great-grandchildren, it's like they're living out of that art. So I think it's our responsibility. So I would love to have the artists help us, to put that into the young generation, but it's up to us.
Thank you. That's basically the question more of a call to action. Yeah, your name, sorry.
Leila.
From Leila, yeah, so please, on that note, we're going to close the questions, and thank you all for your amazing time here this time. We could open it longer if we have more time for questions to be done. I know a lot of people like to ask you a little about the art and whether he watches it every day, and plays it again. But we can ask him to every day when he gets to gather later on. And so with that, I think we're going to call this end to this particular panel. Thank you guys so much.
Did the battery die?
Every 30 minutes it just stops. I just forgot about it. It's all good.